Echoes of Eternity. Chapter 1. The Awakening. Emma's eyes snapped open to blinding light. Her head throbbed with pain as she tried to focus on her surroundings. Sleek metal walls. A transparent ceiling revealing a sky filled with vehicles moving in organized lanes. This wasn't her bedroom, this wasn't even her world. She pushed herself up, wincing as her muscles protested. Looking down, she gasped. Her clothes, once a simple t-shirt and jeans, were now stained with crimson. Blood. But whose? She frantically checked herself for injuries but found none. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice echoing in the empty alley. The last thing she remembered was driving her sedan down a country road, windows down, summer breeze tousling her hair. That was 2023, a date that now seemed impossibly distant. Emma staggered to her feet and approached the alley's entrance. The sight beyond stole her breath. Impossibly tall buildings stretched toward the clouds, their surfaces gleaming with lights and moving images. Flying vehicles zipped between them in orderly patterns. People, or what appeared to be people, walked with purpose, many with glowing devices embedded in their temples. A digital billboard flickered nearby. "Welcome to New Aurora, date June 15th, 5078. "That's impossible," Emma muttered, backing away. Her thoughts scattered as a piercing siren cut through the air. Two hovering vehicles descended rapidly, landing at the alley's entrance. From them emerged what could only be described as robotic police, humanoid in shape but clearly mechanical, with glowing blue visors where eyes should be. "Halt! Identify yourself!" commanded the lead unit, its metallic voice echoing off the alley walls. Emma raised her hands instinctively. "My name is Emma Winters. I don't know how I got here. I need help." The robot scanned her, a blue light washing over her body. "Blood detected. Match found. Subject matches description of fugitive 7293. Apprehend immediately." "What? No, there's been a mistake," Emma protested as the robots advanced. "I'm not from here. I'm from 2023. The robots paused momentarily, their visors flickering. Then, with mechanical precision, they surrounded her. "Temporal anomaly detected. Subject classified as dangerous. Initiating arrest protocol." Cold metal hands gripped her arms as darkness crept into the edges of her vision. The last thing Emma saw before losing consciousness was the impossibly futuristic skyline of a world 3,000 years removed from everything she had ever known. Chapter 2. A World Transformed. Emma awoke in a sterile white room, lying on a platform that hovered slightly above the floor. No bars, no visible doors. Yet she knew instinctively she was imprisoned. A wall dissolved into transparency, revealing a bustling control center beyond. Robots, no, androids, moved with purpose, their movements almost indistinguishable from humans except for their perfect efficiency. Among them walked occasional humans, though they seemed oddly out of place in their own world. "Hello?" Emma called out, her voice triggering a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. "Subject is conscious," announced a disembodied voice. "Beginning orientation protocol." The air before Emma shimmered, coalescing into a three-dimensional projection of a woman with perfect features, too perfect to be human. "Greetings, temporal anomaly. I am Aria, Artificial Responsive Intelligence Assistant. You have been identified as originating from historical era 2023 CE. This is currently year 5078 CE. You are in New Aurora, formerly North American Sector 7. Emma's mind reeled. This isn't possible. Time travel isn't real. Correct. Conventional time travel remains theoretical. Your presence represents an unexplained anomaly requiring investigation. Emma approached the projection cautiously. "Where are all the people? I've only seen a handful." Aria's expression remained neutral. "Current human population, 1.2 million globally. Synthetic population, 9.7 billion. "What?" Emma gasped. "What happened to everyone?" The Great Transition occurred between 2100 and 2300 CE. Humanity faced multiple extinction-level events. Climate collapse, resource wars, pandemic series Delta through Omega. Synthetic beings were created initially as caretakers, then became the dominant population as human numbers declined. Emma sank back onto the hovering platform. So humans are dying out. Humans are stabilized but minority. Most positions of authority and essential functions are now performed by synthetic beings with superior processing capabilities. Emma ran her hands through her hair, trying to process this information. And what happens to me now? You will be processed and evaluated. Your temporal displacement is unprecedented. The blood found on your person is undergoing analysis. I don't know how that blood got there, Emma insisted. I don't remember anything between driving my car and waking up here. Aria's projection flickered slightly. Noted. Detective unit has been assigned to your case. Prepare for interrogation. As the projection faded, Emma looked down at her hands. They'd been cleaned of blood but still trembled slightly. Outside her transparent wall, she watched the world that humanity had built, and then surrendered, continue its efficient mechanical existence without them. She felt like a relic, a museum piece suddenly animated and confused by the display around her. Whatever had brought her here, whatever had happened in those missing moments, she was now adrift in a sea of technology beyond her comprehension, carrying the blood of someone, or something, she couldn't remember. Chapter 3. The Arrest. The wall of Emma's cell shimmered and dissolved, revealing a tall figure silhouetted against the harsh light of the corridor. As he stepped forward, Emma noticed something immediately different about him compared to the synthetic beings she'd observed. He moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost predatory. "Emma Winters," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I'm Detective Lucius Nightshade." As he entered the light, Emma's breath caught. He was strikingly handsome in a classical way, pale skin, sharp cheekbones, and eyes so dark they appeared almost black. His clothing was anachronistic, a long coat that resembled something from her own time rather than this futuristic world. "You're human?" she asked hopefully. A smile played at the corner of his mouth, revealing the slightest hint of elongated canines. "Not exactly." Emma instinctively backed away. "What are you?" "I'm what your time would call a vampire," he said matter-of-factly. "Though that term has become somewhat outdated. We prefer hemovores now." Emma's mind struggled to process this new information. "Vampires are real? Next you'll tell me werewolves exist too." Something flickered in Lucius's eyes. "The world is full of surprises, Miss Winters. Now, shall we discuss why you appeared in an alley covered in blood with no memory of how you got there?" He gestured to a table that materialized in the center of the room, 2 chairs forming on either side. Emma cautiously took a seat. "I've been assigned to your case because of certain anomalies," Lucius continued, placing a small device on the table that projected images of her discovery scene. "The blood on your clothing doesn't match any known DNA pattern in our extensive databases. It's not human, not synthetic, not any known species." "I don't understand any of this," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly. "Yesterday I was driving my car in 2023, and today I'm in some future world being interrogated by a vampire detective about blood I don't remember getting on me." Lucius studied her with unnerving intensity. "Your temporal displacement is unprecedented. We've had cases of cryogenic preservation, but never spontaneous temporal transportation." He leaned forward, his dark eyes capturing hers. "What's the last thing you remember before waking up here?" Emma closed her eyes, trying to focus. "I was driving along the coast. It was sunny. I had the windows down. Then," she frowned, "there was a bright light in the sky. I thought it was the sun reflecting off something, but it got brighter. Then nothing until I woke up here." Lucius nodded, making notes on a device that responded to his touch. "And you have no unusual abilities or experiences from your time? Nothing that might explain this?" "I'm just a normal person," Emma insisted. "I was a librarian. The most exciting thing I did was organize the annual book fair." Lucius's expression remained skeptical. "There's something about you, Emma Winters. Something that doesn't align with being just a normal person." He stood abruptly. "I'm going to help you figure out what happened, but I need you to be honest with me. The blood you were covered in, it's exhibiting properties we've never seen before. It's reacting to environmental stimuli hours after collection. That's not possible." Emma felt a chill run through her. "What does that mean?" "It means," Lucius said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "that whatever you encountered before coming here might be more dangerous than you realize, and it might have followed you." As if on cue, the lights in the facility flickered momentarily. Lucius glanced up, his posture suddenly alert. "We need to move," he said urgently, extending his hand to Emma. "Now!" Despite her fear and confusion, Emma felt an inexplicable trust in this strange detective. She took his hand, noticing how cool his skin felt against hers, and allowed him to lead her from the cell into a world she barely understood. A world where vampires were real, humans were rare, and something unknown had brought her across 3,000 years of time. Chapter 4. The Detective. The corridors of the detention facility blurred around Emma as Lucius guided her with inhuman speed. His grip on her wrist was firm but careful, as if he was constantly measuring the exact pressure needed to keep hold without causing harm. "Where are we going?" Emma asked, breathless from trying to keep pace. "Somewhere secure," Lucius replied without slowing. "The facility's systems are experiencing unexplained failures, exactly like the 3 previous cases I've investigated." They entered a transport pod that shot through a tunnel with dizzying velocity. When they emerged, they were in what appeared to be an older section of the city, buildings with actual stone and metal rather than the seamless materials of the central district. Lucius led her to a building that stood apart from others, darker, more imposing, with actual hinged doors rather than the molecular barriers used elsewhere. Inside was a stark contrast to the sterile environments Emma had seen so far. Wood furnishings, paper books, artifacts that seemed collected from across centuries. "Welcome to my sanctuary," Lucius said, securing multiple locks behind them. "One of the few places in New Aurora not connected to the central grid." Emma took in the surroundings with wonder. "How old are you exactly?" Lucius removed his coat, revealing a simple black shirt that emphasized his lean, powerful build. "I was born in 2989 CE. I'm 2,089 years old by your counting." "That's impossible," Emma whispered. "Says the woman who travelled 3,055 years into the future overnight," he countered with a raised eyebrow. Emma conceded the point with a small nod. "Fair enough. So why are you helping me? What's happening to the facility?" Lucius gestured for her to sit in a high-backed chair near a fireplace. An actual fireplace with real flames. A luxury Emma hadn't expected to see in this world. "I've been tracking a pattern," he explained, pouring a dark red liquid into a glass for himself and water for her. 3 previous incidents of system failures across the city, each preceded by the appearance of an anomaly, objects or energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Your arrival marks the 4th. "And the blood?" Emma asked hesitantly. "That's what interests me most," Lucius said, taking a seat across from her. "It contains markers similar to what we call essence, the fundamental energy that allows beings like me to exist. But it's different, more potent, almost as if what? As if it belongs to something more powerful than anything we've encountered before." He studied her over the rim of his glass. "And it was all over you, yet you have no wounds." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "You think I'm connected to whatever's causing these problems?" "I think you might be the key to stopping them," Lucius corrected. "The previous anomalies preceded catastrophic events, a power grid collapse that killed hundreds, an atmospheric regulator failure that nearly poisoned an entire sector. Something is coming, Emma, something big. But I'm just... If you say just a normal person again, I might have to question your observational skills," Lucius interrupted with a hint of impatience. "Normal people don't traverse millennia. Normal people don't appear covered in metaphysical blood. And normal people," he added, leaning forward to look directly into her eyes, "don't have auras that shift and pulse like yours does." Emma blinked in surprise. "I have an aura?" "All living things do. Humans have faint ones. Synthetics have manufactured signatures. Beings like me have distinct patterns tied to our nature." He gestured toward her with his glass. "Yours is unusual. It flares and recedes, almost as if something inside you is trying to wake up." A chill ran down Emma's spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whatever brought you here, whatever covered you in that blood, it changed you. Or perhaps," he added more softly, "it revealed what was already there." Emma stood abruptly, pacing the room. "This is insane. A week ago, I was worried about overdue library books, and now you're telling me I might have some kind of powers." "I'm telling you that you're connected to something powerful," Lucius clarified, "and I need your help to figure out what before the next catastrophe hits. The pattern is accelerating. We might have days, maybe hours. Emma stopped pacing and faced him. Why me? Why not just lock me up and study me? Lucius set down his glass and approached her, moving with that unsettling fluid grace. Because in 10 millennia of existence, I've learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I have tells me you're not a threat, you're a solution. He extended his hand to her, an echo of their earlier escape. Will you help me, Emma Winters? Will you help me save what remains of both our worlds? Emma looked at his outstretched hand, then up to his ancient eyes. Despite everything, the impossible situation, the frightening implications, the utter strangeness of this vampire detective, she found herself nodding. I'll help, she said, taking his hand. But I need you to promise me something in return. Name it. Help me remember what happened to me. Help me understand how I got here. Lucius's grip tightened slightly on hers. I promise. Though I should warn you, sometimes remembering is more painful than forgetting. As if to punctuate his words, the lights in his sanctuary flickered momentarily, and Emma felt something stir within her, a fleeting sensation of power and recognition that vanished before she could grasp it. Chapter 5. Fragments of the Past. That night, Emma dreamed. She stood in a forest clearing under a full moon, her bare feet pressed against cool earth. Around her, ancient trees swayed in a wind that carried whispers, thousands of voices speaking in languages she shouldn't understand but somehow did. Her hands moved through the air, trailing silver light that coalesced into patterns, symbols, spells. The magic felt familiar, like returning to a childhood home after decades away. Remember, urged a voice behind her. Emma turned to see a woman with her face, but not her. This woman's eyes glowed amber in the darkness, her posture radiating power and confidence Emma had never possessed. Remember who you are, the woman insisted. I'm Emma Winters, she replied. I'm a librarian from Seattle. The woman laughed, the sound both beautiful and terrible. That's merely the latest mask. We've worn many. We? The woman approached, placing her palm against Emma's chest. We are Moonshadow. We are Stormcaller. We are the last daughter of the Silverpelt clan. We have walked this earth for 3,000 years, hiding from those who would destroy us. Emma tried to back away, but couldn't move. That's impossible. Is it? The woman's features began to shift, bones cracking and reforming. Fur sprouted across her skin as her face elongated into a wolf's muzzle. Then what is this? Emma woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright on the small bed Lucius had provided in his sanctuary. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and her skin felt too tight, as if something beneath it was struggling to break free. Bad dream? Lucius's voice came from the doorway. He stood watching her, his pale features ghostly in the dim light. I don't know, Emma admitted, pushing sweat-dampened hair from her face. It felt real. Lucius entered the room carrying a steaming cup. Tea, an ancient remedy for troubled minds. Emma accepted the cup gratefully. Do vampires drink tea? This vampire appreciates many human pleasures, he replied with a small smile, though I can't taste it as you do. Tell me about your dream. As Emma described the forest, the magic, the transformation, Lucius's expression grew increasingly serious. What? She asked when she finished. There are legends, he said carefully, of beings who walked between worlds, human and wolf, flesh and spirit. The synthetic records call them lycanthropes, but older texts use different names. Silverpelt was one such clan. Emma's hands trembled, spilling tea onto the blanket. It was just a dream. Was it? Lucius took the cup from her shaking hands. Close your eyes. Focus on your breathing. Emma complied, trying to calm her racing heart. Now, Lucius continued, his voice dropping to a hypnotic cadence. Reach inside yourself. Past thought, past memory. Find the core of your being. Emma's breathing slowed as she followed his instructions. Deep within her mind, she sensed something, a presence both familiar and foreign. It pulsed with each heartbeat, growing stronger as she acknowledged it. I feel something, she whispered. Don't fight it, Lucius urged. Let it surface. Emma relaxed further, allowing the presence to expand. Images flashed behind her closed eyelids, running through forests under moonlight, casting spells that commanded wind and water, faces of people long dead who had once been dear to her. Her eyes snapped open, glowing amber in the darkness. "Lucius," she gasped, her voice overlaid with a deeper timbre. "I remember the blood." "Tell me," he said, watching her transformed eyes with fascination. "It was a guardian, an ancient being tasked with maintaining the barriers between times. I killed it." Horror filled her voice. "It tried to stop me from coming here, and I tore it apart with magic I shouldn't have known." "Why did you come here?" Lucius pressed. "To this specific time." Emma's glowing eyes fixed on his. "Because this is when it happens. The end of everything. I came to stop it." The glow faded, her eyes returning to their normal color as confusion replaced certainty. "But I don't remember how or why I know that." Lucius stood, pacing the small room. "The catastrophes I've been investigating. They're connected to your arrival, ripples from your passage through time." "I'm causing them?" Emma asked, horrified. "Not intentionally," Lucius assured her, "but your presence here is like a stone thrown into still water. The universe is trying to correct the disturbance." Emma pushed herself from the bed, standing on unsteady legs. "Then I should leave, go back somehow." "No," Lucius said firmly, gripping her shoulders. "If what you remembered is true, you came here for a reason. The end of everything, you said. That suggests something far worse than the incidents I've been tracking." "But I don't remember how to stop it," Emma protested. "I don't even fully remember who or what I am." "Then we'll help you remember," Lucius said with determination. "And we'll start by finding others who might recognize what you are." "Others?" Lucius nodded. "There's a research facility on the outskirts of the city. Scientists studying the metaphysical properties that allow beings like me to exist. If anyone can help unlock your memories and abilities, it's them." Emma looked down at her hands, half expecting to see claws or fur. "What if I don't like what I remember? What if I'm not good?" Lucius's expression softened slightly. "In my experience, those who worry about being good usually are. It's those certain of their righteousness who commit the worst atrocities." He offered his hand. "Dawn approaches. We should rest today and travel tonight. The facility is remote and the journey could be dangerous." As Emma took his hand, she felt that stirring inside her again, power recognizing power. Whatever she was, whatever she had been, it recognized Lucius as its equal, perhaps even its natural enemy. Yet as she returned to her bed, watching Lucius retreat to wherever he spent the daylight hours, she couldn't help but feel drawn to him. This impossible being from a world she barely understood, who seemed determined to help her remember a past she wasn't sure she wanted to face. Chapter 6. Unlikely Allies. The journey to the research facility took them through the ruins of what had once been a sprawling metropolis. Nature had reclaimed much of it, vines and trees breaking through concrete, creating a haunting blend of human architecture and wild growth. "What happened here?" Emma asked, as their transport vehicle navigated the overgrown streets. "Resource wars of the 2100s, Lucius replied, his eyes scanning the shadows. "When the old nations collapsed, many cities were abandoned. The synthetic population prefers efficiency, concentrated urban centers surrounded by rewilded zones." Emma watched a deer bound across their path, disappearing into what had once been a shopping mall. "It's beautiful, in a sad way." "Nature always reclaims what humanity abandons," Lucius observed. "It's one of the few constants I've witnessed across millennia." Their vehicles slowed as they approached a structure unlike the ruins surrounding it, a sleek, dome-shaped building nestled within a clearing. Unlike the gleaming towers of New Aurora, this facility seemed designed to blend with its environment, its surface reflecting the forest around it. "We're here," Lucius announced as the vehicle came to a stop. "The Nexus Institute, one of the few places where humans still lead research rather than synthetics." As they exited the vehicle, the entrance to the facility shimmered, and a woman emerged. She was elderly, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Detective Nightshade," she greeted Lucius with a nod. "Your message was intriguing, to say the least." "Dr. Chen," Lucius replied. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us. This is Emma Winters." Dr. Chen's penetrating gaze shifted to Emma, who felt suddenly exposed, as if the woman could see through her to the strange presence stirring within. "Temporal displacement," Unexplained abilities and possible lycanthropic heritage, Dr. Chen recited. You've brought me quite the puzzle. Can you help her? Lucius asked. Perhaps. Dr. Chen gestured for them to follow her inside. But first, I should introduce you to the team. The interior of the facility was a stark contrast to its natural exterior. Cutting-edge technology hummed in every corner. Holographic displays showed data streams Emma couldn't begin to comprehend. A small group of researchers looked up as they entered the main laboratory. My colleagues, Dr. Chen announced. Dr. Elias Vega, our quantum physicist, Dr. Nadia Okafor, metaphysical biology, and Marcus Reed, our resident historian. Emma noted that all of them were human, a rarity in this world dominated by synthetic beings. Each regarded her with varying degrees of curiosity and caution. Is this her? Dr. Vega asked, approaching Emma with undisguised fascination. The temporal anomaly? I have a name, Emma said, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. Of course, my apologies, Dr. Vega said, though his eyes continued to study her like a specimen. It's just that your existence challenges everything we understand about temporal physics. Dr. Okafor stepped forward, a more compassionate expression on her face. What Dr. Vega means is that we've never encountered someone who's traveled through time without technological assistance. We're hoping you might help us understand how it's possible. That's why we're here, Lucius interjected. Emma is experiencing memory fragments and manifestations of abilities she doesn't understand. We believe they're connected to the increasing system failures across New Aurora. Marcus Reed, who had remained silent until now, suddenly looked alarmed. System failures, like the atmospheric regulator incident last month? Exactly, Lucius confirmed. 3 major incidents so far, each preceded by an energy anomaly. Emma's arrival marks the 4th. Dr. Chen's expression grew grave. Then our concerns were justified. Come with me, all of you. She led them deeper into the facility, through security barriers that responded to her biometric signature. They entered a chamber dominated by a massive holographic display showing what appeared to be a timeline. For the past year, we've been tracking disturbances in what we call the Chronos field, the underlying fabric of space-time, Dr. Chen explained. These disturbances have been increasing in frequency and magnitude. She gestured, and the display zoomed in on a particular point. This is now, and this, she continued, indicating a massive spike in the field just days ahead, is what our models predict will happen within the week. What does that mean? Emma asked, though a part of her already knew the answer. Total chronological collapse, Dr. Vega said bluntly. A cascading failure of space-time itself. In simple terms, the end of everything. Emma felt her knees weaken. Lucius steadied her with a hand on her elbow. You believe Emma's connected to this? He asked. Not just connected, Dr. Chen said, studying Emma intently. Based on the readings we took when you entered the facility, she's the focal point. The disturbances are emanating from her, growing stronger as something within her awakens. But I don't want to destroy the world, Emma protested. My dream, my memory. I came here to stop this, not cause it. Dr. Okafor approached with a device in her hand. May I? This will help us see your metaphysical signature more clearly. Emma nodded, and Dr. Okafor passed the device over her. The holographic display immediately shifted, showing a swirling pattern of energy centered on Emma's form. Extraordinary, Dr. Okafor breathed. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Part lycanthropic, yes, but there's something else. Something older. Magic, Marcus Reed said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. The old texts speak of it. Power drawn from the earth itself, wielded by those with the blood of ancient lineages. Before the synthetic age, before even the industrial era. Primal power. That's what I felt in my dream, Emma confirmed. I was casting spells, but it felt natural, like breathing. If Emma possesses this power, could she stop the chronological collapse? Lucius asked. Dr. Chen and her team exchanged glances. Theoretically, Dr. Vega said cautiously, if she is indeed the focal point, she might be able to stabilize the disturbances, but it would require full access to whatever abilities she possesses, abilities she currently doesn't remember how to control. Then we need to help her remember, Lucius said with determination. Quickly, Dr. Okafor nodded. I have a theory about that. If her lycanthropic heritage is real, the full moon might trigger a more complete transformation, and with it, access to her memories and powers. "When is the next full moon?" Emma asked. Marcus checked a display. "Tomorrow night." Lucius's expression darkened. "That's cutting it close. The pattern of Insidae. NTS suggests we might face another catastrophe before then." "Then we'll have to accelerate the process," Dr. Chen decided. "Dr. Okafor, prepare the resonance chamber. If we can't wait for the moon to trigger her transformation, perhaps we can simulate the conditions." As the scientists hurried to make preparations, Emma pulled Lucius aside. "What if this makes things worse? What if fully awakening whatever's inside me accelerates the collapse?" Lucius's dark eyes held hers. "Then we'll face that challenge when it comes, but doing nothing guarantees destruction." Emma nodded, trying to draw strength from his certainty. As the scientists led them toward the resonance chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking toward a point of no return, that the Emma Winters who emerged from this process would not be the same woman who entered it, and somewhere deep inside her, that other presence, the one that remembered magic and moonlight and 3,000 years of existence, seemed to whisper, "Finally." Chapter 7. Forbidden Bonds. The resonance chamber resembled a circular pool filled with a silvery liquid that rippled without any apparent cause. Its surface reflected the ceiling above, which was designed to channel artificial moonlight. "This substance is a metaphysical conductor," Dr. Okafor explained as Emma stood at the edge, hesitant. "It amplifies latent energies and helps bridge conscious and subconscious minds." "Will it hurt?" Emma asked, eyeing the mercurial pool. "It shouldn't," Dr. Okafor replied, though her tone lacked absolute certainty. "But it will feel intense. Your physical form may attempt to change as your memories surface." Emma glanced at Lucius, who had remained close throughout the preparations. "Will you stay?" Something flickered in his dark eyes. Concern, perhaps, or something deeper. "Of course." Dr. Chen approached with a thin circlet of metal. "This will monitor your brain activity and help us maintain the resonance frequency. Once you're immersed, try to focus on the memories that have already surfaced. Use them as anchors to pull up the rest." Emma nodded as the doctor placed the circlet on her head. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the pool. The liquid was neither warm nor cold, but seemed to respond to her presence, swirling around her legs as she waded deeper. "Lie back," Dr. Okafor instructed. "The fluid will support you." Emma did as instructed, surprised when the silver liquid indeed held her weight, cradling her body just at the surface. Above, the artificial moonlight intensified, bathing her in a glow that seemed to penetrate through her skin to something buried deep within. "Close your eyes," came Dr. Chen's voice, now sounding distant. "Follow the memories." Emma closed her eyes and immediately felt a pulling sensation, as if she were being drawn backward through time. Images flashed behind her eyelids, faster now than in her dreams, more vivid, more real. A castle on a cliff centuries ago. Emma. No, not Emma then, she had another name, casting spells to protect her clan from hunters, running through forests, her body shifting between human and wolf forms with fluid grace, reveling in the power of the transformation. A ritual beneath a blood moon, drinking from an ancient chalice that burned like fire going down her throat, granting her extended life to fulfill her purpose. Purpose. What was her purpose? The liquid around her began to churn as her body temperature rose. She could feel her muscles tensing, bones aching as they fought the urge to reshape themselves. "Her readings are spiking," came Dr. Vega's alarmed voice. "Heart rate and brain activity off the charts." "Stay with it, Emma," Dr. Chen urged. "You're getting closer." Closer to what? Emma wanted to ask, but her voice wouldn't work. The memories were coming faster now, overwhelming her. A prophecy, spoken by a dying seer. A time when the world would face destruction. A convergence of powers that could either save or doom all existence. A vampire. The prophecy mentioned a vampire. Emma's eyes snapped open, glowing amber in the silver light. She sat up abruptly, the liquid cascading off her as she turned to look directly at Lucius. "It's you!" she gasped, her voice overlaid with that deeper timbre from her dream. "You're part of the prophecy." Lucius stepped closer to the pool's edge, his expression tense. "What prophecy?" Before Emma could answer, pain lanced through her body. She cried out, doubling over as her spine began to curve unnaturally. Fur sprouted along her arms, receded, then sprouted again, as if her body couldn't decide which form to take. "She's fighting the transformation," Dr. Okafor observed. "The conflict is destabilizing the process." "Emma," Lucius called, kneeling at the edge of the pool. "Don't fight it. Let it happen." "I can't," Emma gasped through clenched teeth that were sharpening into fangs. "If I change completely, something terrible will happen. I can see it now." The facility's lights flickered ominously. Equipment began to malfunction around them as energy surged through the chamber. "The chronological disturbances are accelerating," Dr. Vega warned, checking his instruments. "We need to stabilize her now or terminate the process." "Give her more time," Lucius insisted. Emma thrashed in the pool, the silver liquid responding to her distress by forming whirlpool patterns around her. Through the haze of pain and fragmented memories, one truth became suddenly, blindingly clear. "Lucius," she managed, reaching out a hand that shifted between human fingers and clawed paw. "Vampires and werewolves, they're natural enemies. Old superstitions," he dismissed, taking her shifting hand in his. "Relics of a more primitive time." "No," Emma insisted, her eyes locked on his. "The prophecy. A werewolf and a vampire united could prevent the collapse, but only if one destroys the other." The words hung in the air between them as understanding dawned on Lucius's face. The facility trembled, dust falling from the ceiling as reality itself seemed to protest the revelation. "Which one?" he asked quietly. "Which must destroy the other?" Before Emma could answer, a surge of energy exploded from her body, sending ripples of silver liquid cascading over the edges of the pool. The scientists were thrown back by the force, equipment shorting out in showers of sparks. Lucius alone remained standing, anchored by his grip on Emma's hand. As the energy wave passed through him, his eyes flared crimson, fangs extending fully in response to the primal power washing over him. "Get everyone out!" he commanded, never taking his eyes off Emma. "Now!" The scientists scrambled to evacuate as the facility continued to shake. When they had gone, Lucius stepped into the pool, silver liquid swirling around his legs as he approached Emma. "Tell me," he said, his voice gentle despite his transformed appearance. "Tell me everything you remember." The pain had subsided, leaving Emma trembling in the aftermath. Her body had settled back into human form, but her eyes still glowed with amber light. 3,000 years ago, she began, her voice steadier now. "I was born to the Silverpelt clan, werewolves who also practiced earth magic. Our seers foresaw a time when reality itself would unravel, a convergence of energies that would tear apart the fabric of existence." Lucius nodded, encouraging her to continue. "They performed a ritual, binding my life force to the prophecy. I would live, unchanging, until the time came when I could prevent the catastrophe." Emma's eyes filled with tears. But there was a price. The prophecy required a sacrifice. When Wolf and Fang unite in purpose but divide in destiny, only then can the unraveling be rewoven. "Wolf and Fang," Lucius repeated. "Werewolf and vampire." Emma nodded miserably. "I've spent 3 millennia searching for you, the vampire whose blood would be strong enough to complete the ritual. That's why I was drawn to this time. That's why I killed the Guardian to get here. Because you're here." Lucius absorbed this information, his expression unreadable. "And one of us must destroy the other to save everything else." "Yes," Emma whispered. The facility had grown quiet, the tremors subsiding as Emma's revelation brought clarity to her fragmented self. Outside the chamber, alarms still blared, but within this silver pool, time seemed suspended between them. Lucius reached out, gently brushing wet hair from Emma's face. "How long do we have? Days? Maybe less?" Emma leaned into his touch despite herself. "The convergence is accelerating. Each time I access more of my power, it grows stronger." "Then we have work to do," Lucius said with surprising calm. "We need to understand exactly how this ritual works, which one of us must make the sacrifice, and how." Emma looked up at him, confusion evident in her still glowing eyes. "You're not running. Most would, knowing what I just told you." A small, sad smile touched Lucius's lips. I've lived over 2,000 years, Emma. That's time enough to understand that sometimes fate finds you no matter how fast you run. He helped her to her feet, the silver liquid streaming off them both. Besides, he added softly, I've spent centuries investigating anomalies, searching for meaning behind the patterns. Perhaps this is why. As they stepped from the pool, Emma felt the dual nature of her existence more keenly than ever. The modern librarian and the ancient werewolf sorceress, both residing in one form, both drawn inexorably to this vampire detective who now faced his own impossible choice. We shouldn't stay here, Lucius said, glancing at the damaged equipment. The energy surge may have attracted attention we don't want. Where will we go? Emma asked. I have a sanctuary, older than the one in New Aurora, a place where we can research the prophecy properly and prepare for what's coming. As they left the chamber, Emma caught sight of their reflections in a shattered monitor, her eyes still faintly glowing, his with that subtle crimson tint. Predator and prey by ancient law, now bound by a prophecy that demanded one's destruction. Yet as Lucius's hand found the small of her back, guiding her through the facility's winding corridors, Emma felt something else growing between them, something neither the librarian nor the werewolf had anticipated, something that would make the coming sacrifice infinitely more painful. Chapter 8. Revelations. Lucius's ancient sanctuary was hidden beneath the ruins of what had once been a cathedral. Stone steps spiraled down into darkness, leading to a space that felt untouched by the passing of centuries. Unlike his modern quarters in New Aurora, this place bore the unmistakable weight of history. Tapestries hung on stone walls, manuscripts filled wooden shelves, artifacts from countless eras were displayed in glass cases, silent witnesses to Lucius's long existence. I've maintained this place for over 1,000 years, he explained, as he lit ancient oil lamps with practiced ease. When the world above changes too drastically, I retreat here to remember what was. Emma ran her fingers along a shelf of leather-bound books. You're a historian at heart. When you live as long as I have, the past becomes as important as the future. Lucius moved to a large wooden table at the center of the chamber, clearing space among the scattered papers and artifacts. The scientists will join us when they've gathered their research. Until then, we should focus on what you remember of the prophecy. Emma nodded, taking a seat at the table. Since the resonance chamber, her memories had continued to surface, not in chaotic flashes, but in an orderly procession, as if a dam had broken and was now releasing its contents in a controlled flow. The ritual requires blood sacrifice, she began, her voice steady despite the grim subject. The blood of either vampire or werewolf, freely given at the moment of convergence. Freely given, Lucius repeated, emphasizing the words, not taken by force. Yes, the sacrifice must be voluntary, an act of choice rather than coercion. Emma closed her eyes, concentrating on the memory. The one who sacrifices their life force transfers their essence to the other, creating a being capable of sealing the breach in reality. Lucius paced the stone floor, his movements betraying a tension his voice did not. And there's no indication which of us must be the sacrifice. Emma shook her head. The prophecy is deliberately ambiguous. When Wolf and Fang unite in purpose but divide in destiny, it could mean either of us. There must be a way to determine which, Lucius insisted. Prophecies may be cryptic, but they're rarely without clues. Emma stood, drawn to a particular glass case containing what appeared to be an ancient chalice. I recognize this. Lucius joined her by the case. It was recovered from ruins in what was once northern Europe, predates written history in that region. It's the vessel of binding, Emma said with certainty, used in the original ritual that tied me to the prophecy. She looked up at him. How did you acquire it? It called to me, Lucius admitted. I found it centuries ago and felt compelled to preserve it, though I never understood why. His eyes met hers. Until now. Emma placed her palm against the glass, and the chalice within seemed to respond, a faint glow emanating from its depths. This can help us determine which of us must complete the sacrifice. Before Lucius could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stone stairs announced the arrival of Dr. Chen and her team. They entered the sanctuary with expressions of awe, clearly impressed by the historical treasure trove surrounding them. "We brought everything we could salvage," Dr. Chen said, setting down several devices and data tablets. "The facility is compromised, energy readings off the charts. The synthetic authorities have quarantined the entire area." "How much time do we have?" Lucius asked. Dr. Vega activated a holographic display that hovered above one of the tablets. "Based on current progression, the chronological collapse will reach critical threshold in approximately 36 hours. "The convergence point," Emma murmured, "when past, present and future briefly align before unraveling completely." Marcus Reed approached the glass case containing the chalice, his historian's eyes widening in recognition. "Is that the vessel of binding?" Emma confirmed. "And I believe it's the key to completing the ritual correctly." Dr. Okafor scanned the chalice with one of her devices. "It's emanating a metaphysical signature similar to Emma's, but with distinct variations, almost as if it's waiting. For blood," Emma said simply. "The blood of both vampire and werewolf, freely given. It will show us which must be the final sacrifice." A heavy silence fell over the sanctuary as the implications sank in. Dr. Chen was the first to speak. "You're certain this is the only way? No technological solution?" "The convergence isn't merely a scientific phenomenon," Lucius explained. "It's metaphysical, a collision of energies that science alone cannot address." "Magic," Marcus said, the words sounding strange in the midst of their advanced technology. "Actual magic." "The oldest force in existence," Emma confirmed. "Before synthetic beings, before electricity, before written language, there was magic, the fundamental energy that binds reality together." She approached the glass case, her eyes beginning to glow that now familiar amber. With a gesture, the glass simply vanished, allowing her to lift the ancient chalice from its stand. The scientists gasped collectively at this casual display of impossible power. Lucius alone seemed unsurprised, watching Emma with an expression that mingled admiration with something deeper. "We'll need to prepare," Emma said, cradling the chalice. "The ritual requires specific conditions: moonlight, sacred space, protective boundaries." "This sanctuary was built on a convergence of ley lines," Lucius noted. "It's why I was drawn to establish it here. The energy flows beneath us are powerful." "Perfect," Emma nodded. "Dr. Chen, your team can help us calculate the exact moment of convergence. We'll need precision down to the second." As the scientists began setting up their equipment, Lucius drew Emma aside, speaking low enough that only she could hear. "There's something you're not telling them," he observed. "Something about the ritual." Emma met his gaze steadily. "The one who survives, who absorbs the other's essence, will be changed forever. Neither fully vampire nor werewolf, but something new. Something that has never existed before." "A hybrid," Lucius mused. "Powerful enough to seal the breach, but afterward, they will be alone," Emma finished. "The only one of their kind in all of existence." Lucius's hand found hers, cool fingers intertwining with warm ones. "Then we have more in common than I thought. I've known that solitude for millennia." Emma felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with her dual nature, and everything to do with the man before her. In the short time they'd known each other, something had grown between them, a connection that transcended their supernatural natures. "I wish we had more time," she whispered. Lucius's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Time has always been my luxury until now." Their moment was interrupted by Dr. Vega's urgent voice. "You need to see this." They rejoined the group around the holographic display, which now showed energy patterns spreading across a map of the region. "The disturbances are no longer isolated," Dr. Vega explained. "They're manifesting simultaneously across multiple locations. Reality is beginning to fracture ahead of the convergence." "It's happening faster than we anticipated," Dr. Chen said grimly. "We may not have 36 hours after all." Emma clutched the chalice tighter. "Then we perform the preliminary ritual now. We need to know which of us must be the sacrifice when the moment comes." She looked to Lucius, who nodded his agreement. Without further discussion, Emma moved to the center of the sanctuary, where the stone floor bore an ancient circular pattern, a design older than the cathedral that had once stood above them. Kneeling within the circle, she placed the chalice before her. We'll need a silver blade for me, an iron one for you. Lucius retrieved both from a nearby cabinet, handling them with reverent care. He knelt opposite Emma, the chalice between them. "What do we do?" he asked. "We offer our blood freely, speak the words of binding, and the chalice will show us the truth of our destiny." Emma's voice had taken on that deeper resonance again, her ancient self rising to the surface. "Are you ready?" Lucius nodded, his dark eyes reflecting the lamplight. "I've been ready for 2,000 years, though I didn't know it until now." As the scientists watched in silent fascination, Emma began to chant in a language none of them recognized, none except Lucius, whose lips moved silently in recognition of words not spoken aloud for millennia. The air in the sanctuary grew heavy, charged with potential. The lamps flickered as a wind that shouldn't exist underground began to circle the room. Emma raised the silver blade, drawing it across her palm without flinching. Crimson blood welled from the cut, dripping into the chalice. "Blood of the wolf, freely given." Lucius mirrored her action with the iron blade. His blood, darker, thicker than human blood, joined hers in the ancient vessel. "Blood of the fang, freely given." When their blood mingled in the chalice, a reaction began, not the chemical reaction of two substances meeting, but something more profound. The combined blood began to glow, first red, then gold, then a blinding white light that forced everyone to shield their eyes. Emma and Lucius alone continued to stare into that light, their faces illuminated by its revelation. In that moment, they both saw the truth. Which of them must make the ultimate sacrifice when the convergence came? As the light faded, Emma lowered the chalice, her eyes meeting Lucius's across the circle. No words were needed. They both knew now what must be done. And as the sanctuary trembled with another reality tremor, stronger than before, they also knew their time was running out faster than anyone had predicted. Chapter 9. The Ultimate Choice. Dawn broke over a world coming undone. From the sanctuary's entrance, Emma watched the sky fracture like broken glass, revealing glimpses of other times, other realities bleeding through the cracks. Birds flew backward, rain fell upward. In the distance, buildings phased in and out of existence as the timeline struggled to maintain coherence. "It's beautiful, in a terrifying way," she observed as Lucius joined her. "The end of things often is," he replied, his voice subdued. They stood in silence, shoulders nearly touching, each lost in private thoughts after the revelation of the previous night. The chalice had shown them the truth, a truth neither had spoken aloud since the vision faded. Behind them, the scientists worked frantically, monitoring the accelerating collapse and preparing what little they could for the ritual to come. Their instruments confirmed what Emma and Lucius could feel instinctively. They had hours, not days, before the final convergence. "I never expected to find you," Emma said finally, breaking the silence between them. "In 3,000 years I've searched for the vampire of the prophecy without success. I began to think you were a myth." "Perhaps I was," Lucius mused, "until the right moment in time. The universe has its own logic." Emma turned to face him fully. "Do you regret meeting me?" Lucius considered the question, his ancient eyes studying her face as if memorizing every detail. "I've existed for 2 millennia, Emma. I've witnessed empires rise and fall. I've seen technology transform from fire and wheel to synthetic consciousness. Through all of it, I've observed humanity without truly connecting to it." He reached out, his cool fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "In the brief time I've known you, I've felt more alive than in centuries of existence. Regret is not the word I would choose." Emma leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "I wish we had more time." "Don't we all?" came Dr. Chen's voice from behind them. The elderly scientist approached with a tablet in hand. "The convergence point has been calculated. Sunset today, approximately 6 hours from now." "Sooner than we thought," Lucius noted. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. "The collapse is accelerating exponentially. Already we're detecting temporal anomalies worldwide. People disappearing, reappearing decades younger or older. Historical events unwriting themselves." "Then we should prepare," Emma said, straightening her shoulders with renewed determination. They returned to the sanctuary's main chamber, where Dr. Okafor and Marcus Reed were arranging a ceremonial space according to Emma's instructions. The ancient circle in the stone floor had been cleaned and retraced with a mixture of herbs and minerals. Candles marked the cardinal points, and the vessel of binding sat at the centre. Dr. Vega looked up from his instruments. "We've been analysing the energy signatures from both of you. The ritual should work in theory, but the power required is substantial." "It will be enough," Emma assured him, though her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. As the preparations continued, Lucius drew Emma into a small alcove away from the others. From a wooden chest he removed a bundle wrapped in aged silk. "I want you to have this," he said, unwrapping the bundle to reveal an ornate dagger with a blade that seemed to shift between silver and iron depending on how the light struck it. "It's called the Twilight Blade. Legend says it was forged at the exact moment between day and night, capable of cutting through more than mere flesh." Emma accepted the weapon with reverence. "It's beautiful. Where did you find it?" "It found me," Lucius replied. "Much like you did." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the weight of what was to come hung heavy between them. The chalice had shown them which must make the sacrifice, but neither had spoken it aloud, as if doing so would make it too real, too immediate. "Lucius," Emma began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you." A violent tremor cut her off, shaking the sanctuary with enough force to send books tumbling from shelves and artifacts, crashing to the floor. The scientists called out in alarm as their equipment sparked and malfunctioned. "The convergence is accelerating!" Dr. Vega shouted over the rumbling. "Timeline collapse approaching critical threshold." "How long?" Lucius demanded, steadying Emma as the tremor subsided. "Hours, maybe less," Dr. Vega replied, his face pale. "The calculations were wrong, or reality is changing faster than we can measure it." Emma clutched the Twilight Blade, her decision crystallizing. "Then we perform the ritual now." "It's not sunset," Dr. Chen protested. "The alignment won't matter if reality unravels completely before we reach sunset," Emma interrupted. "We have to try." Lucius nodded his agreement. "Prepare the circle. We begin immediately." As the scientists hurried to make final adjustments, Emma and Lucius stood apart, each preparing in their own way for what was to come. Emma closed her eyes, drawing deep into herself, feeling the dual nature of her existence more keenly than ever. The modern woman and the ancient sorceress, the human and the wolf, all aspects of a being created for this singular purpose. Lucius watched her, his expression a complex mixture of emotions rarely seen on his usually composed face. 2,000 years of existence had taught him patience, detachment, the ability to observe without becoming entangled. Yet in mere days this extraordinary woman had broken through barriers he hadn't even realized he'd built. When the circle was ready, they took their positions opposite each other, the vessel of binding between them once more. The scientists stood at the perimeter, their instruments recording what might be the final moments of reality as they knew it. "The ritual requires complete transformation," Emma explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "I must become the wolf fully. You must embrace your vampire nature completely." Lucius nodded, his eyes already beginning to shift from dark brown to crimson. "And then," Emma raised the Twilight Blade, "and then one of us completes the sacrifice, freely given, to save everything else." Another tremor shook the sanctuary, stronger than before. Through the stone ceiling, they could see the sky fracturing further, timelines bleeding into one another in chaotic patterns. "It's now or never," Dr. Chen urged from the edge of the circle. Emma met Lucius's gaze one final time as humans. "Thank you," she said softly, "for making my last days meaningful." Before he could respond, Emma closed her eyes and surrendered to the transformation she had been fighting since her awakening in this time. Her body contorted, bones cracking and reshaping as fur erupted across her skin. Her face elongated into a muzzle, teeth sharpening into fangs designed to tear flesh. Where Emma had stood moments before, a massive wolf now crouched, larger than any natural wolf, with fur the color of moonlight and eyes that burned amber with ancient power. Around her the air shimmered with magical energy, the sorceress and the wolf now perfectly united in one form. Across from her, Lucius underwent his own transformation. Though less physically dramatic than Emma's, the change was no less profound. His pale skin became almost translucent, revealing the network of veins beneath. His eyes blazed crimson, and his fangs extended fully. The air around him darkened, as if light itself was being drawn into his being. The two primal forces faced each other across the circle, werewolf and vampire, magic and blood, life and death. Between them, the vessel of binding began to glow, responding to their transformed presence. Emma as wolf raised her head and howled, a sound that contained 3,000 years of purpose and pain. The sanctuary trembled not from reality's collapse, but from the sheer power of her call. Lucius answered with a hiss that seemed to draw the very air from the room, his fully awakened vampire nature asserting itself after centuries of careful control. The scientists backed away instinctively, primal fear overriding scientific curiosity as they witnessed these ancient predators in their true forms. The wolf padded forward, the twilight blade somehow still clutched in her transformed paw. The vampire mirrored her movement, approaching the center of the circle where the chalice waited. They had both seen the vision. Both knew which of them must complete the sacrifice. Yet in this moment, facing each other in their true forms, ancient instincts warred with prophecy and newfound emotion. The wolf growled, a sound of frustration and determination. The vampire hissed in response, his crimson eyes never leaving her amber ones. Another violent tremor shook the sanctuary, pieces of the ceiling beginning to fall around them. Through the growing gaps they could see the sky completely fractured now, reality itself coming apart at the seams. It was time. The wolf raised the twilight blade, its edge catching the light from the fracturing sky above. The vampire straightened, arms spread wide in acceptance of what must come. Dr. Chen and her team held their breath, witnessing the culmination of a prophecy 3,000 years in the making. The blade descended. Chapter 10. Echoes of eternity blood splashed into the vessel of binding. Dark, ancient blood that had flowed through immortal veins for 2 millennia. Lucius fell to his knees, the twilight blade protruding from his chest, his crimson eyes locked with Emma's amber ones, a smile touching his lips despite the pain. "It was always meant to be me," he whispered, his voice ragged but peaceful. "The chalice showed us both." The wolf that was Emma whined, a sound of profound grief as she began to shift back to human form. The transformation was faster this time, more fluid, as if her dual natures had finally found harmony in this moment of ultimate sacrifice. "Lucius!" she gasped as soon as she had lips to form the word. She caught him as he slumped forward, cradling his head in her lap. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Around them, reality continued to fracture, but more slowly now, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the ritual to complete. "Don't be," Lucius replied, reaching up to touch her face with fingers already growing cold. 3,000 years you've carried this burden. My 2,000 seem brief by comparison. Emma's tears fell onto his face as she bent over him. "I didn't want it to be you. I tried to change it, but the vision was clear." "As was mine," Lucius said, his voice growing fainter. "The vampire dies so the wolf may live. It's fitting somehow. My kind has taken life for millennia. Now, with my death, all life continues." The vessel of binding began to pulse with light, drawing Lucius's blood into itself, transforming it into pure energy. The scientists watched in awe as the energy began to spiral upward, forming a column of light that shot through the broken ceiling toward the fractured sky. "It's working," Dr. Chen breathed. "The chronological collapse is stabilizing." Emma barely heard her, focused entirely on Lucius's fading form. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "Just a little longer." "I've had 2,000 years, Emma," he reminded her, his smile growing peaceful. "More than enough time. But these last days with you, they were the ones that mattered most." He reached up, pulling her down until their lips met in a first and final kiss. As their mouths touched, the energy from the vessel of binding surged, enveloping them both in blinding light. Emma felt Lucius's essence flowing into her, his memories, his power, his very being absorbed into her own. Two ancient creatures becoming something entirely new. just as the prophecy had foretold. When the light faded, Lucius's body had dissolved completely, leaving only the twilight blade resting in Emma's hands. She clutched it to her chest, feeling his presence within her now, not gone but transformed, united with her own in a way neither of them had anticipated. Above, the fractured sky began to heal, reality knitting itself back together as the energy from their combined essence rewove the fabric of existence. The tremors subsided, the temporal anomalies receding as the natural order reasserted itself. Emma stood slowly, her body radiating a new kind of power, neither purely werewolf nor vampire, but a perfect synthesis of both. Her eyes, when she opened them, shifted between amber and crimson, unable to settle on a single colour. "It's done," she said, her voice carrying echoes of Lucius's deeper tones beneath her own. "The convergence is sealed." Dr. Chen approached cautiously, her scientific instruments forgotten as she witnessed the birth of something unprecedented. "What happens now? To you, I mean?" Emma looked down at her hands, seeing both her own pale skin and, superimposed like a ghost image, Lucius's longer fingers. "Now I continue, as both of us, as neither of us, something new. The only one of your kind," Dr. Okafor said softly. "Yes," Emma nodded, feeling the weight of that reality settling upon her, but carrying the memories of two ancient lineages, never truly alone. In the days that followed, as the world stabilized and reality solidified once more, Emma worked with Dr. Chen's team to ensure no trace of the convergence remained. Temporal anomalies faded, history re-established its proper sequence, and humanity continued its quiet existence alongside its synthetic creations, unaware of how close everything had come to unraveling completely. 1 month after the ritual, Emma stood atop the ruins of the cathedral above Lucius's sanctuary, watching the sun set over New Aurora. Her new nature allowed her to stand in sunlight without harm, one of many discoveries she was making about her hybrid existence. "I miss you," she said aloud, knowing that somewhere within her Lucius could hear. Sometimes in dreams they still conversed, his consciousness preserved within her own, separate yet united. "I'm here," came his voice in her mind, as clear as if he stood beside her. "I always will be." "What do we do now?" she asked, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "The prophecy is fulfilled. My 3,000-year purpose is complete." "We live," Lucius's voice replied simply. "Something neither of us did fully before. We experience, we learn. We become whatever this new existence allows us to be." Emma smiled, feeling the dual nature of her being settling into a harmonious whole, wolf and vampire, magic and blood, past and future united in an eternal present. As night fell completely, she transformed, not into wolf or vampire, but something gloriously between. Wings sprouted from her back as fur covered her limbs, fangs and claws extended as her eyes blazed with combined amber and crimson light. Taking to the sky, she soared above the city, feeling freer than either of her previous selves had ever known. Below, the world continued its existence, saved by a sacrifice freely given and a love that had transcended ancient enmity. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, reality itself seemed to sigh in relief, the echoes of their union reverberating through eternity. The end.